Today we are in Parsha Vayeira. This is the second Parsha about Avraham. And we see that Avraham continues to grow and move forward. So all these Parshas have to do with us. And what is the way for us to go forward and accomplish our purpose that we learn from this Parsha? So at the beginning of Parsha Vayeira, Avram has just been circumcised himself, and is sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day, hoping to have guests. And at this point, God is revealed to him. God reveals himself to Abraham. Now, God is being revealed. When God is being revealed to anyone, as you can imagine, that's an intense state of consciousness. But Abraham had experienced a special connection when God spoke to him in Parshas Lech Lecha. But there, it tells us that Avram prostrated himself, face down, and God spoke to him. So now it's different. Until then, Avraham had searched for the one God, and he looked up from below to find and connect. But here, in contrast, in our Torah portion, in Vayeira, when God is revealed to Avraham, he calmly sits at the entrance of his tent. So what is different here? Even with the intensity of the spiritual revelation that was taking place, Avram was calm in God's presence. So it seems that he was able to balance the high and intensely spiritual revelation of the divine with being a hospitable person, sitting at the entrance of his tent and looking for guests. Now Avraham is able to connect above with below. That's what's going on here. Before, he was coming from below trying to connect to God. Then God appeared to him in last Parsha. He prostrated himself. That means he wasn't able to stand in God's presence. But in this Parsha, God appears to him and he's able to just take that calmly and be there. So he's able now to balance the high and intensely spiritual revelation of the divine with being a hospitable person, sitting at the entrance of his tent looking for guests. So Avraham is able to connect above to below, and we want to understand what to do because that's what we're supposed to be doing. Connecting from below to above and above to below so that there is a oneness. What can I do for you, God? So the sages tell us that this is because he had been circumcised. The Brit, the word Brit means covenant with God, expressed by Brit Milah, enabled Avraham to keep his balance when God was revealed to him. So why should circumcision have this effect? So one explanation is because it establishes a pact with God, including the most physical part of the person. And this gives the person the ability to reach for the highest level of the sacred, while at the same time keeping his feet on the ground. I just would like to mention that Avraham knew, he was very tuned into God, and he knew what God wanted from him. And so he did many things that later on became commandments in the Torah because he tuned in. But he didn't do a brit until God told him to do it. Because it's another level, a higher level, when we say, I'm doing this because God wants me to do this. Not because I know that this would be a good thing, but God commanded me to do this. So, according to the sages, for a male, the covenant of circumcision requires a physical procedure. In contrast, a Jewish female is considered to be born circumcised. She is born with the ability to balance holiness with the reality of daily life. But this is something a man has to do. Another aspect of the Brit, the covenant which balances holiness and daily reality, is that it has the power to affect not only one's physical body, but also the world in general. And the prime example of this is the sacred land of Israel. The sages tell us that by merit of the covenant of circumcision, the Jewish people were given possession of the Holy Land. They were able to transform the land of Canaan into the sacred land of Israel, the land where the divine is most intensely revealed. And this is the purpose of the Jewish people in the world, to join holiness and daily reality, including physical flesh and physical earth, both with balance and joy, to make this world a place where we are conscious of living in the presence of God. That's our job. So let's see what happened more specifically in the Parsha. At the beginning of Parsha Vayeira, God appears to Abraham to visit him after his circumcision. Given their new level of connection, now he has said, I'm going to give you this land, and he appears, and Abraham is able to live with God, to connect with him. They have a new level of connection. And so God says, he informs Abraham what he's about to do. He's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And this allows for conversation between Abraham and God. So now that God is telling him, this is what I'm going to do, Abraham feels, well, we have a relationship. I'm going to say something here because I feel I need to say something. And so we had already learned that Lot, Avram's nephew, settled in Sodom, despite the fact that its inhabitants were very evil and sinful to God. That was what the pasuk said, that the inhabitants of Sodom were very evil and sinful to God. Now that God had shared his plan to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah with Avraham, Avram now asked God to save the people of these cities. So God says he's going to destroy them, obviously, because the people are so evil. And Avraham is saying, well, let's talk about this, which is a beautiful kind of relationship with God, saying, I can talk to you. Let's have a relationship. I can even make changes. I'm going to ask that you make these changes. And we see the relationship of above to below being met with the connection from below to above, one relationship. So Abraham begins pleading with God to spare the sinful city in the merit of the righteous residents that may be there. Abraham bargains with God if there would be 50 or 40 or 30 or 20 or even 10 righteous people, save them. But it turns out there are not even 10 such righteous people that could be found there. So what were the sins of Sodom? The Talmud, Midrashim, and commentaries talk about their lack of hospitality. See, this is the parsha where we're talking about Avram is sitting at the tent right after he had a Brit Milah. He was 99 years old. This was not the most pleasant thing for him to do, but he did it. So he was healing, but it didn't stop him from trying to find guests because that's what he did. What did Sodom do? They had a virulent opposition to any one of their own people who dared to share any of the city's wealth with a stranger. In the words of the Talmud, the men of Sodom were corrupted only on account of the good which God had lavished on them. Interesting. Because of all the good, they became wealthy and they became spoiled and they didn't want to share. And they said, since there comes forth bread out of our earth and it has the dust of gold, why should we put up with the travelers who come to us only to deplete our wealth? Come, let us abolish the practice of lodging travelers in our land. They even found a way to be charitable while ensuring that no stranger would benefit from their charity. It's very extreme. If a poor man happened to come there, every resident gave him a dinar. He came to ask for money. They gave him money. And when they gave him the money, they wrote their own name on the coin. And then they didn't let anybody sell him anything for the money. So he couldn't buy any bread, and then he died. And when he died, each one came and took back his dinar. That's extremely evil, extremely evil. They went so far as to decree whoever hands a piece of bread to a pauper or a stranger shall be burnt at the stake. Extreme evil. And I won't even tell you some of the things that it says that they did that were so cruel to their own people if they were kind to strangers. So Sodom has the opposite traits than those of Abraham, who's portrayed by the Torah as the very personification of chesed, of loving kindness. Now, they're the opposite of humility, recognizing that everything belongs to God, including the gifts that God gives us. Now, Abraham gives of himself materially, providing food and lodging to wayfarers, and spiritually sharing the truths he discovered, and he prayed for Sodom. But while the person in Sodom is focused on keeping for himself what he has, they're so praying for them, but they are who they are. They have ingrained that into themselves so deeply that they don't want to change. So the people of Sodom were not thieves like the generation of the flood was. Instead, when they take away the possessions of a visitor, they're careful to do it in a legal way. So, in fact, their basic philosophy seems quite harmless. In the words of Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the father, one who says what is mine and what is yours is the trait of Sodom. It sounds fair. Of course, the people of Sodom took this to cruel extremes, torturing those who gave hospitality despite the rules of the city. But what he is saying is, I won't touch what's yours, but don't expect me to give you anything. And according to Pirkei Avot, this so-called fairness is the essence of evil. It's cold. Their egotism expresses a complete lack of unity. Some people don't want to change or share. They want to keep what they have, not recognizing that whatever they have was a gift from God, and not willing to connect to God or people. So they don't want to connect. They just want to keep what's theirs. And even their own people, they were cruel to if they tried to make some unity with others. So I want to talk about this. And so God says there aren't even 10 people that you can rely on making it worthy of change. But let's talk a little bit about this world and how it's meant to be handled. It's a little bit of Kabbalah. So before God made this world, God created the world of Tohu. Tohu was destroyed in order to make a world of Tikkun. So we are now in a world of Tikkun. So Tohu is chaos. It's chaos. And here we're in the world of fixing. So let's understand what was the difference between that world and this world, and what we need to understand for who we are meant to be and what we're meant to do here. So in that realm of the chaos Tohu world, each quality, each sphera was separate. They also had, as we've spoken before, Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet. They had all these qualities, but they were placed one on top of each other. They were separate. So each sphera, because it was one on top of the other, couldn't see or relate to each other at all. So in that world where each one was separate, that was a world full of lights. Now, lights means energy, potential, wealth, everything good. But the many lights of Tohu were strong, great lights but the vessels were few and not strong enough. So when we talk about this, we talk about what's called lights and vessels. So if one is on top of the other, light, 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 but they have no place to go. So if light on top of a vessel and then light on top of a vessel, then the lights can be used. So the chaos of the inability to relate and learn from each other, they didn't have that because it was so much intensity and so much light. And so this world of Tohu didn't have any balance. So what's an example of bringing light into vessel? So let's say that we're saying that the lights are like water, and that water, if it needs to fill something like a pitcher or a glass, it has to have the right amount of light to fill that pitcher or that glass. But if you have a flood knocking down the pitchers, then the pitchers don't hold any of it. So that's why we hold often a glass and we pour from the pitcher the right amount of water so that the glass will hold it. Then we take the next glass and hold it. So in our world of tikkun, of fixing things, it's very important that the right amount of light should go into the right amount of water. But it didn't work like that in Tohu. Everything just kind of broke. The lights were so intense that those sparks of light fell into the world of tikkun, of fixing, where the sefirot were placed in relationship to each other. What does that mean? Instead of being one on top of the other where they couldn't see each other, we have Chachma on the right, Bina on the left, Dot in the middle. Then lower than that, Chesed on the right, Gevur on the left, Tiferet on the middle. So in other words, they relate to each other. They relate to each other. So through this, the world could be built. In the world of tikkun, there were fewer lights, but many vessels appropriate to hold them. So here in this world, God gives the right lights so that it works for here. And there's so many obvious examples of this, like if a mathematics professor knows a tremendous amount of math, and he goes to somebody in the first grade or even the third grade or even the fifth grade, and he gives a lecture, the children will be, they won't have the vessels to hold it. But if they start with, okay, let's talk about numbers. And then after that, let's talk about how we work with the numbers. And instead of pouring it out all at the same time, they give it in a way that could be related to, then, in other words, they have to hold back some of their great knowledge to be able to give it in a way that's going to go into the right vessels. So in this world, people could elevate the sparks that had fallen down from the world of Tohu and raise them back up to their source, thereby fixing the world. So here we take these lights, and the thing is to use them properly. There's a lot of discussion about this these days with AI, which is a lot of light, that it should be used properly and not in a way that's just not good for people. So this is the work to utilize things in a way that is meaningful. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that in these days, it's our work to bring the lights of Tohu, of this chaos world, into the vessels of Tikkun, which is the world of fixing with order. So how can we bring these wild lights down? How do we bring our wildly productive potentials and bring them down into stable reality? Now, the world of Tikkun is a dimension of time and space and measurement. In this world, we do specific mitzvahs that are given to us to do depending on specific situations with specific details. Like Shabbos. Well, I can't say, I feel like having Shabbos right now. How about right now? We're all going to do Shabbos together. No. Shabbos has a time and a space. It has measurements. When do we go into Shabbos? And what do we do there? So the mitzvot are measured. And we can bring tohu, which is including our wild emotions, which are not naturally limited, and bring them into our orderly actions. And the Rebbe spoke about how to do this, how to bring the lights of tohu into the vessels of tikkun. The Rebbe said that now is the time to bring Mashiach with joy. And joy is not measured. Mitzvahs are done in this world of tikkun with their own dimensions of time and space, but we could do a mitzvah in the world of tikkun and fill it with joy, with an enthusiastic joy that will make the mitzvah beyond its measurements. And so we do the mitzvah with its requirements, but we take it beyond its limitations by doing it with joy. So this is, you think about going into Shabbos, and you say to the children, it's going to be Shabbos, and we should be excited it's going to be Shabbos. And we go into Shabbos with joy. I'm so excited. And that changes everything, because what happens is that we're doing the mitzvah in the way that the Shulchan Aruch, the book of Jewish law, is telling us. And the mitzvah is grounded because we're doing it in the world of tikkun. But when we do it with joy, it flies. And that's the world of tohu. So we're bringing the world of tohu into the world of tikkun. And we totally put ourselves into the opportunity by filling it with life. So in doing the mitzvah this way, we do it. And at the same time, we go beyond ourselves to do it in the best way, with enthusiasm. And this brings our potentials from above into our practical, joyful possibility to do it. So this is something that we need to know. And this is something we should always be working on, to serve God with joy. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. That's something that God wants from us, to do with joy, not to look at the mitzvah as something heavy, which it's not, but to look at the mitzvah with joy. How beautiful that we are privileged to be able to do what God would like us to do. So here we have Abraham trying to change God's thinking about saving the people, because he has so much love that it's hard for him to accept that people are not going to survive. So he went against his own nature, Avram, and he spoke sternly at first. He said, God, you would do this? What kind of behavior is this? That's what he said to God. Not making calculations about how to do it, like, could you please do that? Because the angels were on the way already to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And he felt he needed to save the lives if he could do that. So even though Abraham bargained with God to save 50 righteous people, or fewer, or even fewer, God told Avram that there weren't even 10 righteous people there. And Avram tried his best to convince God to save the people, but God evaluated the situation and made it clear that the judgment remained. Such an interesting way of looking at this conversation with God, that God hears us and answers us and makes his own decision, but he hears from our perspective what we're asking for. So the stories of our forefathers are lessons for us, his descendants. And just as we inherit from Avram the kindness and the love that he had, we have to be ready to take action when it's called for. And that's what Avram did. He said to God, come on. So Avram's tests were meant to bring him beyond his nature. And we each have a nature that is easily suitable to us. We were created this way, but our nature is habitual. That's how we're used to doing things. So we need to get beyond our usual way We have to reach beyond ourselves, and we have to use qualities that we don't usually use or are beyond our comfort level. So then we're trying to change. We have to say, what can I do to make this work better so that it's really going to work, so I could get beyond myself? So this is exactly what we need to do to get beyond our comfort level, to make changes, to fulfill the challenge that we need to take by going right into the needed action with strength and conviction, even if we have to go beyond our natures. So as God decided, the two angels go forward to Sodom, and they're disguised as men. They visit the city, but only Lot, who was educated by his uncle Abraham, will give them opportunity. And Lot saves them from the Sodomite mob, and they in turn rescue him and his two daughters before destroying the city. It's really the angels come and say, we're going to save you. You have to come with us. Now, they tell Lot that the city is going to be destroyed. And they say, he had two daughters that were not married, and he had other daughters and sons-in-law. And he told them, the city's going to be destroyed, come with us. But they were Sodomite men. So they said, what are you talking about? Not happening. So they didn't go. So and even Lot hesitates. And it's hard for him to go because of his habits, because it's hard to leave your home that you've worked on and made beautiful. But the angel pulled him and said, you have to go. And he pressures him because the city is about to be decimated with fire and sulfur. So Lot and his wife and his two daughters leave the city. Lot is saved, but they are told that there's one condition: to go forward and not look back. So you have to understand that when we are having an opportunity to grow, we need to go forward and not look back. And Lot's wife does look back, and she's turned into a pillar of salt. Why did she do that? So sometimes we know that we have to leave something that's not good for us, a behavior, a relationship, a way of living, a habit, that I know I have to leave that. I have to leave it and go forward, because only by leaving it can we go forward, which is what we learned in Lech Lecha. And if I can't let go of the destructive past habit and get over feeling sluggish and unable to move and stuck with the old habits that never worked, if I can get over that, I can choose life and build a new life. Looking back means staying connected to the old way. Now that it has become clear that it never worked, and we think about that sometimes with relationships, people who are hurtful, people who don't care and really have not been nice. And if we keep looking back and hoping that it's going to change when they've been doing this for years, so why should it change? Then we are stuck in looking back, and then we can't go forward. But if we accept, look, this person doesn't really care, and it's just the way it is. I don't have to dislike them, but I just have to accept this is the reality and stop looking back. I have to stop looking back at things or people that were not good or respectful or whatever is saying. And it's time to let go and not look back and just keep moving forward. And it's up to us to be grateful for God's intervention in showing us how to save ourselves. Just go forward. So this is the challenge we all go through. Everybody goes through this. Lot's wife was so connected to her habitual negative sodomite qualities that she couldn't imagine herself in any other way. By looking behind, she stayed behind. She couldn't imagine going forward, so she didn't. So we have to be able to say, I can't change that person. She is who she is, and that's what it is, and it's okay. And I don't have to keep hoping someone will change who doesn't seem to want to change or is not able to change. So to stop looking backwards and keep going forwards is how we change our own natures. We need to go forward. Lot's wife was so connected, she just, because of her inability to imagine, we have to imagine ourselves going forward. I can go forward. I can have a good life. I can make good choices. I am going forward to what God wants for me. Obviously, that wasn't what God wanted for me, so I'm going forward. There's a story, there's a Chabad rabbi met a young man who had been involved in a cult, like a real cult. And he felt so enmeshed in the cult, it was hard for him to get out of it. And he was now beginning to connect to his Judaism, but the cult left an impression and he didn't know how to get out of it. So he didn't know how to move forward because he didn't know how to get out of where he was in the past. So this rabbi brought this young man to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, bring him to your father. Rabbi Bukit Sr. was an older rabbi from Russia. The young man went into his room. He came and said, the Rebbe said that I should bring this person to you. So Rabbi Bukit met him. The young man went into his room and told Rabbi Bukit how he didn't know how to get out of this past addictive confusion. And Rabbi Bukit looked at him and said quietly, see, he said, he didn't know how to do it. And he said, drop it. Drop it. And it was over. He just left. He just left it behind. So sometimes it doesn't have to be like a whole complicated, I feel so bad about it, to talk to my therapist about it. I have to tell my, 75 people I know what happened. How can I get myself out of it? You know what? Drop it. Drop it. And just keep going forward. So we all need to go beyond the habits of our natures, of our society. Just as God told Abraham to do in Lech Lecha. Go to you, which means go beyond the old picture of yourself to the land, to the will that I will show you. Abraham goes forward again and again. Now, our covenant with God gives us support and direction. The Brit was the foretaste of the giving of the Torah at Sinai, when God came down on the mountain to the entire nation. We are all, each of us, meant to utilize our natures, and go beyond them. So we can be kind, but if it's inappropriate in a certain way, like with Avraham, when he wanted to save the city of evildoers, as it says in the Torah, and God said, you can't do that. There aren't even 10 people to save. I have to just let go of that and say that's God's decision. And all of this Brit is preparing us for Sinai. So we use our natures and go beyond our natures. And we're here to connect heaven and earth and our soul with our body. So we're always connected to God, but we don't always feel it. How can we leave the past habits that keeps us feeling like a pillar of salt, stuck, and to go forward to be able to take action in the present ways that keep us moving forward? So in this Parsha, we also have, after the Parsha, this is the Parsha where there's the miracle of Yitzchak being born, Isaac. A lot happens in this Parsha. But there's a Haftorah. The Haftorah is read after the Torah reading is read. And in this week's Haftarah, there was a prophet Elisha. Elisha was actually, his teacher was Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet. So he's a great prophet, Rabbi Elisha. And he told, there are two miracles here, and we're going to look at one of the miracles and understand its relationship to help us to go forward in our own lives. So this is in the book of Melachim, the book of Kings. First, we'll talk about the story, and then we'll talk about the understanding of what it means, and so that we can understand how to relate it to ourselves. There was a wicked king. This is a true story. There was a wicked king and queen, Achav and Jezebel. They oppressed Torah scholars and prophets, and they killed many of these righteous people. One administrator of that court was a righteous prophet, a Roman convert, and his name was Obadiah. So God prophesied to Obadiah about the Roman exile that was about to happen. So Obadiah wanted to save the prophets and the scholars because he saw what was coming, because God showed it to him. So he used his own money. He was wealthy, and he used his money to bribe and save many, many prophets. Later, he went into debt. He used all his money. So that was an example of a kind person who gave and gave and gave and gave. And later on, he went into debt. And he borrowed money from the son of Achav, this wicked king. And he did whatever he could, but he died ultimately in anguish because he couldn't save more people. He did everything that he could, but he couldn't save more people. His wife continued to be persecuted, and they threatened to take her two sons into slavery unless she would pay the money. The text says there was a woman, Obadiah's wife, who cried out to Elisha the prophet and said, "You know that my husband died, and he was a God-fearing man. And now the bill collectors want to take my two sons. Do something." And Elisha said, "What do you have in the house? Anything?" And she said, "My cupboards are bare. But I have one little jug of olive oil." And Elisha said, "This is good. Go to your neighbors and borrow as many jugs and jars as you can. Prepare them in your house. Make sure your children are there. Close the doors and pour from this jug into jar after jar after jar after jar, bringing all the vessels, like the light going into the vessels. Fill each jug and keep pouring. As long as there are containers, the oil will continue to pour." You hear the miracle. It's a little jug of oil, just keep pouring, and it will pour, 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 and fill it. One son took it away, another son put the next one near. Keep filling, keep filling, keep filling. And she did it until there were no more empty jars. So she came to Elisha and asked, "What shall I do?" And Elisha said, "Sell the oil and pay back the debts, and you'll have enough oil to live on for the rest of your life." And the merit of what her husband did and her own merit, the miracle was she would have enough oil to sell for the rest of her life. And that's the story. Okay, so what does it mean to fill the vessels with oil? Okay, so now we need to understand it in the deeper level. And Chassidus tells the inner insight. The Alter Rebbe and others taught about this. The Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1985 spoke about this Haftarah. So spiritually, what is the message of the inner meaning of Torah? Okay, so now this is where we have to look at it for ourselves. This is a beautiful and fundamental teaching of life. What is the inner explanation of the story of the woman who turned to Elisha for help? So it says there was one woman. What is this one woman? The neshama, the soul in us. Okay, so here's the soul. The soul is an extension of God. So the soul, the woman, turned to Elisha, my God. So the soul looks up to God and says, I have a problem. Your servant, my husband, died. Now, in Hebrew, the word for husband or father, av, is chachma. Chachma means wisdom. And chachma is the connection from above starting to go below. And she's saying, my intellectual commitment and excitement is dead. She said her husband is dead. Her intellectual commitment and excitement is dead. And she said, this is the soul saying that she's not intellectually motivated to serve God. And she said she has no more desire toward Torah and mitzvahs. So who are the bill collectors? The impure, secular energies of life. And they're coming to take my two sons. So what are the sons? The sons are the offspring of the parents, the ability to awaken the mind. So the parents are Chochmah and Bina. They are actually called parents. And love and fear of God are the emotions. In other words, the mind brings out emotions. When you say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, my friend is coming. You think that my friend is coming. I'm so excited because the excitement comes from, I love her so much. So then we get emotions. The mind says she's coming. Now I feel emotions. Good. So when she's saying to Elisha, the bill collectors are coming and they want to take away the emotions. They want to take away my love and fear of God. And then what's going to happen? So she's saying, I'm about to lose my emotional connection to you and Torah. And then she's saying, I'm attracted to other stuff because the secular worldly stuff is pulling her away from God. Like love of cake or fear of terror or other places where emotions can go. And she's saying, what should I do? The neshama is saying, help me. Hashem, what should I do? And Elisha, which is connected to my God, she says, tell me, my neshama, what do you have within you? And she says, I only have a small jug of olive oil. So what's olive oil? Olive oil is pure and essential. Olive oil is the oil representing the spark of the soul that can never be assimilated. We need to know that there is a spark in us, a soul spark that can never be affected by anything out there, can never be assimilated. That soul spark is connected into God forever, and we need to know that. So God says to the soul, I want you to get a lot of vessels, utensils. What does that mean? Create activity of Torah and mitzvahs. Do and do and do. Just do mitzvahs. Make a vessel, make a vessel, make a vessel. And the soul will fill it. And even if you don't feel like it, the feeling will come. In other words, just because you don't feel like you know what to do next, don't go back to bed and feel sad. Do a mitzvah. Do something. That's why it's very good to have like a Torah, like a tzedakah pushka, like a box where you can have like a little plate or bowl where you have dimes and nickels and quarters and whatever you have there. And when you don't know what to do, take a dime, put it in the tzedakah box. Do something. Do an action. And the pouring of the spark of our soul into action will revive you and bring about emotional and intellectual connection to Hashem. And that's why the Rebbe felt that action is the most important. It needs to be done. sometimes one mitzvah can change everything. So when we do this one mitzvah, what happens is that a mitzvah can awaken an awareness and take that spark and have it pour infinitely and endlessly. So when we do something here below, our neshama, the spark of our soul, goes into it. It's actually interesting that sometimes when somebody feels that a miracle has been done for them, sometimes it's something like a car was heading right toward you, and then it slammed on its brake. And it's a good thing after that to give tzedakah or do something that helps you to acknowledge, more than thank you, but do something that in this world says, God, I know you're taking care of me. I want to thank you. I want to do something in this world. And so even in many situations, if a person says, they're in a relationship and, in a marriage or with a close friend, someone who is really a good friend, and they don't feel like doing something, act like it. Act as if. That's what they say, act as if. And when you act as if, then the emotion will come. So that's something that we need to do, to recognize that that emotions make all the difference. It's interesting that very often we start with a mitzvah, like the Rebbe was very encouraging that people put on tefillin today, put on Shabbos candles. Why would you ask somebody to do that? And you're starting with the action. Then you learn about the mitzvah. This is very much like what we did at Mount Sinai, when we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, and then we will work on understanding it. But to do, before the Six-Day War in 1967, the Rebbe made, because he knew that this war was coming, the Rebbe made the tefillin campaign. And people set up tables with tefillin, and many people lined up and put on tefillin one after the other. Thousands of people who didn't ordinarily put on tefillin stayed in line because the Lubavitcher said this will make all the difference. And they did it, and they realized somehow that this mitzvah could save them from the danger of war. And this was the action, the vessel that they made, and the victory was miraculous. The miraculous lights came into the vessels that allowed for their salvation. So the Rambam, Maimonides, tells us to view our world as being half good and half evil. We don't need to change the whole world with all of its moral wrongs. All we need to do is just one act of goodness in this moment to tip the scales in our favor. And just one positive act by one individual. And any of us can be in that person who does something good, can change everything. So in taking godly action, like Avraham did and these descendants that we are, we connect above into ourselves here in the world, and we move forward and transform ourselves and the world.